The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
Today's world news, what it means, where it's taking us.
I bring you the one and only possible message of world peace.
This is a message of hope, tremendous hope. And he said unto me, you must prophesy again.
The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
If they can ship Kilmar Abrego Garcia to a foreign prison accused of no crime with no trial, they can do it to anyone.
This is a case about due process. This is not about who the person is. This is about, do you have the right to have due process? This is not about whether or not a person is guilty. This is about whether or not they deserve a trial before they are deported.
Whatever he's responsible for, charge him with it here, according to our constitutional system in a court of law, according him due process. The same due process rights, by the way, that Donald Trump got as a criminal defendant.
We are a country of rules and laws.
You are allowed due process in this country. Whether you're a citizen or not, you have certain rights before they can take away your right to freedom.
Right. And what we're seeing with Trump is him trying to unravel some of these rules and laws.
This guy was never convicted of anything, has no criminal record at all.
This is not merely deportation, but deportation to a dictator's terrorist holding facility.
Yeah.
Gulag is what we've been calling it today, rightfully.
A brutal gulag.
Pretty much like a concentration camp.
Concentration camp.
Where some of them probably won't come out alive. Are Americans okay with that?
There are a lot of Americans who, in the abstract, do not care about due process.
If you support the Constitution, you don't throw people into detention centers in El Salvador.
We also demand the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who's in El Salvador. This is America. We demand our rights. We demand our freedoms, our due process, and we don't just point a finger and lock someone up without their day in court. Never.
Democrats should have someone on the ground in El Salvador every day until Kilmar Abrego Garcia is sent home.
But the point is, why are they doing this?
Right.
And the answer is they want to have the American people say it's okay to just disappear people.
Right.
And somehow they think if they can make up lies about him, if they can do whatever they want, then the answer will be the American people will settle for this. We do not disappear people in the United States. Because here's the thing. If they can disappear Mr. Abrego Garcia, then they can disappear you.
The fight for Kilmar. It continues. The Democrats are not letting this go. This has been their track record. I mean, whether it's you look at some of the stories recently, this black teenager that stabs the white kid to death, and suddenly the black guy becomes rich. Yeah, GoFundMe pay. People are just pouring money because all of the social media lies. Well, he was just defending himself. Plus it was, he killed a white guy. So the black guy must be a hero. And you look at recent history, Trayvon, Mike Brown, now the MS-13 guy. Defending the criminals. That's what the Democrat Party has become. Just defend the thugs. We ought to have somebody on the ground in El Salvador every day, says one of them. Then you got AOC, who went by Sandy at college. She's pulling out the Spanish accent, El Salvador. The people that these Democrats side with, I mean, it tells you everything that you need to know. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily. We appreciate you joining us on today's show. You can get to the live video stream of this program at trumpetdaily.com or at the Rumble channel, rumble.com/Trumpet Daily. We still have the replay on Live from America every evening. That, too, is a Rumble channel. And, of course, the email address, td@thetrumpet.com. We learned today that in 2022, this is during the fake administration of Joe Biden, that I think it was in Tennessee, authorities pulled over Kilmar Garcia. He was stopped in Tennessee with 7 passengers He didn't have a driver's license. He was traveling from Texas to Maryland. He was on the terror watch list, okay? And those that pulled him over suspected him of human trafficking. And guess what Joe Obama's FBI told the authorities there locally in Tennessee? Let him go. Let Kilmar free. Let Kilmar go out and kill more. It's unbelievable. Let the criminals roam. Get representatives, not just one U.S. senator. I mean, we need someone on the ground in El Salvador every day. And meanwhile, as I've said, Donald Trump knows he has the majority support of just ordinary Americans that are applauding this. Send him to, they're calling it a concentration camp, this mega prison in El Salvador. They're calling it the Gulag. We've got to save him. We've got to save this wife beater. We've got to bring him back to a due process, don't you know? He's not even a U.S. citizen. And here you have people screaming for due process for Kilmar. Listen to CNN's Harry Inton, I think his first name's Harry. He's going on about just the widespread support that Donald Trump has from the American people on this. Clip 4.
Why is Trump focusing on immigration? Let me just tell you, this is where Trump wants to focus. Pretty please, with a cherry on top. Why is that? Look at Trump's net approval rating on immigration. Compare where we are now. Compare where we were at this point in his first term. In his first term, he was underwater at minus 12 points. Look at where he is today. He's actually above water. This is one of his strongest issues at plus 1 point. And more than that on the net approval for him on this issue has stayed steady in the positive. This is an area where Donald Trump wants to focus because the bottom line is this is an area in which the American people, at least the bare majority of them, seem to like what he's doing.
Compare where he is on immigration to where Biden was. We know that this was why he leaned into immigration so much.
Yes, this is a big reason why. So take a look here. This is on immigration. What track are we on? The right track or the wrong track? Look in December. Look at the percentage who said we were on the wrong track. 62% of Americans when Joe Biden was in office, compared to just 14% who said that we were on the right track. Flash forward to April. Well, hello. 45% say we're on the right track compared to 42% who say we're on the wrong track. So in a big switcheroo from where we were back in January, the plurality of Americans say that the country is on the right track when it comes to immigration policy. Back in December when Joe Biden was president, the vast majority said that we were on the wrong track. Again, this points out that on the whole, Americans like where we're going on immigration policy under Donald Trump, which is very different from where we were under Joe Biden.
And comparing the kind of then and now and the progression over time, what about on the specific issue of deportations? I mean, compare it maybe today Trump to first-term Trump.
Yeah, this, I think, is the big change. You know, we were talking about changes in policy and how Americans want policy to be carried out. Deport all undocumented immigrants. Voters favoring the government trying to deport all 11 million of them. Back in 2016, just 38% of voters wanted the government to try to deport all 11 million undocumented immigrants. Compared to where we are in 2025, 56%, the majority. The American people have come a long way on this issue, much closer to Donald Trump. And I think that's a big part of the reason why Americans are increasingly saying the country is on the right track when it comes to immigration policy, and why Donald Trump's net approval rating on that issue is in the positive, very much unlike his first term.
That last bit there is stunning. 56% say deport them all. Not just the MS-13 gang members, not just the gangbangers, all of them. 56%. And here is the dying and failing Democrat Party. I mean, you see the polls as they're mentioned there on CNN for all to see. What about the internal polling? Does Chuck Schumer look at this? Or some of these other Democrat operatives that are calling for Democrats to be on the ground in El Salvador? Think about how many families, as I said earlier this week, have suffered because of violence, because of murder. brought on by illegals. People from El Salvador and Venezuela and all over the world that are coming into America and committing these horrible criminal acts, crime, murder, rape. And they're not even featured on CNN or MSNBC. At the White House. This was either yesterday or the day before. They had Patty Morin. She's the mother of this woman that was brutally beaten and murdered at the hands of an illegal. She's just there to tell her story. And of course, Fox carried it live, but not MSNBC, not CNN. They've got to tell you about Kilmar. Kilmar needs due process. We've got to be concerned about Kilmar's rights. Listen to the mother of that slain victim, that American citizen. This is clip 19.
A lot of you don't know the whole story about Rachel and about the crime that was committed against her. Even us, her family, we didn't know all the details. I sat for the last 2 weeks in her trial, and we saw layer upon layer upon layer of evidence against the accused, an illegal immigrant from El Salvador. She was planning on going to the grocery store with her girls afterwards. These are the kind of people that have no compulsion. Like, to them, this is nothing. And when he was sitting in the courtroom, he actually looked like he thought he was going to be set free. There was no remorse on his face at all. This person took my daughter so violently and so gruesomely and so graphically that they sealed the pictures, because I don't want my granddaughters to see these pictures. These are the kind of criminals President Trump wants to remove from our country. I don't understand why there's even any kind of problem with this. We are American citizens. We need to protect our families. I want to preserve life, and that's the only reason why I have taken and spoken about Rachel all this time. If you're a mother here in the room, can you imagine standing there alive? You're alive, and someone comes and puts their hands into your chest and rips out your heart? That's what it feels like. It feels like a part of you is being ripped out of you. You can't even describe the pain. Why are we not protecting the American citizens? It's just common sense. Why are we not protecting our children? And to have a senator from Maryland who didn't even acknowledge or barely acknowledge my daughter and the brutal death that she endured, leaving her 5 children without a mother and now a grandbaby without a grandmother, so that he can use my taxpayer money to fly to El Salvador to bring back someone that's not even an American citizen. Why does that person have more right than I do, or my daughter, or my grandchildren?
And what you didn't see there is that at the end of this testimony, riveting testimony, tragic, gut-wrenching, the press was unusually quiet. Yeah, the White House press pool, they didn't have any questions for the mother. The mother of the woman that was brutally murdered. A mother of 5, as you heard there. And here you have taxpayer dollars going toward this overseas junket for a senator from Maryland to fight for the rights of Garcia. Kilmar! We've got to defend Kilmar. And if you work as a producer at MSNBC or CNN, you've got to blot out this woman's testimony. Just don't even show it. If you're a White House reporter, don't ask her a question. Don't pursue this particular story. And you notice the murderer, he too is from El Salvador. I forget the name of the guy that killed Morin. But all these people just pouring into the country. And finally, in the spirit of Trayvon, in the spirit of Mike Smith, in the spirit of the black teenager that stabbed the white kid to death, finally the radical left has someone that they can defend. A radical gangbanger who beats his wife. The New York Post said the White House communications director described it as shameful that the two left-leaning networks didn't cover the Patty Morin remarks. Morin also expressed outrage that Senator Chris Van Hollen is pushing for Garcia's release, Kilmar Garcia's release from the mega prison in El Salvador, while having barely acknowledged the death of her daughter, a mother of 5 children. Scott Jennings, I had this clip the other day, didn't play it, but he brought this out on a CNN roundtable, and I mean, they shouted him down because, well, you're conflating this murderer that killed Morin with Kilmar. Kilmar's a Bulls fan. Kilmar, I mean, he's a family man from Maryland. He's a Maryland resident. Listen to Josh Hawley and Jesse Waters as they comment on these Democrats trying to defend the indefensible. Clip 2.
They have such contempt for this country and such contempt for the rule of law that they would rather go spend their time in maximum security prisons with criminal illegals and cry over the process rights of criminal illegals rather than meeting with Americans who have lost their children to these illegals, rather than meeting with workers who are losing their jobs to these illegals. I mean, listen, you can tell where their heart is, where the Democrats' heart is. Their heart is with the criminal illegals. Their heart is with the people who are endangering this country. Their heart is with the guy who beat his wife, for heaven's sake. I mean, this is absurd stuff. And it just shows you the moral lows to which they have stooped. They hate Trump so much that they are willing to go grovel to illegals in foreign countries. They hate Trump so much that they want to personally escort every single illegal he's deported back into the country. Jesse, it's total Trump derangement syndrome, but it's anti-American is what it is. I mean, again, these guys need to realize that it's time to start defending the United States of America.
It's not just anti-American, it's anti-human. I mean, this is a mother who was ignored by these politicians, and they just, as you said, are groveling over a guy who's been accused of beating his wife and is a verified member of MS-13, and now a terrorist, according to this government. Unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. It is hard to believe. I mean, as you heard there, they hate Trump so much that they want to go and try to get the gangbanger released from El Salvador's prison. That's how much they hate the bad orange man. Trump derangement syndrome is still alive and well, even though he's back. I haven't been plugging this book as much recently because he's back, as this book said he would be. But if you want to learn more about Trump derangement syndrome and see what they're willing to do because they hate Trump so much, make sure that you call our operators and request America Under Attack. I mean, you see the same spirit of hatred and rage all over the world. Look at how much they hate Trump in Europe or China or wherever else. It really is fueling this spirit of murder. It's engulfing the whole world. The whole world's convulsing, shaking. It's in realignment. And Trump, in many ways, is seen as the catalyst, the cause. The National Post, we had this the other day, it's talking about Trump derangement syndrome in Canada. After placing a framed photo of the U.S. President Donald Trump on a table, Matthew Burke steps back and takes a mighty swing with a baseball bat. Glass shatters as the frame explodes. The obliterated image vanishes. You see, this is completely okay. This is rational. This is normal. Take a baseball bat, start beating a picture of Donald Trump. One of our news gatherers was at a place getting his haircut last week. And the lady there said, I wish someone would shoot him. This was in Canada. I wish someone would shoot him. If people would just listen to themselves and then look in the mirror. What is wrong with our thinking? I mean, these are extreme cases, okay. But how do you listen to this mom's testimony and not say, listen, we're very sorry for your loss. Can you fill us in some details on the court case, let's say, and what makes you think that he thought he was going to be set free, and what was his demeanor and disposition like? Nobody cares. Nobody in the press pool cares. Because, as Hawley said there, they hate Trump so much. That's how much they hate him. Try to get Kilmar out of prison so he can commit more crimes here in America. It's all about due process. Now they're concerned about due process. Okay. They tried to assassinate Donald Trump. They created laws, quote unquote, to try to put him in prison for centuries, Donald Trump. They hate Trump so much. Satisfied with his effort, the 14-year-old, dressed in dark coveralls, a paintball mask, and body armor, high-fives his older sister and mother. Welcome to the Rage Room in Halifax, where clients have been lining up to take part in Smash the Tariffs special event. Smash the tariffs. Smash Donald Trump. When asked why he wanted to take a swing at, this is a 14-year-old. And the parents, they're probably smiling and clapping alongside. Why he would want to take a swing at the president's picture. He says, it's about how he's treating this country. You see, Trump's the villain. Trump's the problem. His 17-year-old sister used a golf club to thrash her photo of the U.S. Commander-in-Chief. I came here to safely get some frustration and anger out. This is at the National Post in Canada. Just, taking out my anger on a picture. Terry LeBlanc of Rage Room Halifax says he's been hearing how people are feeling anxious and upset in the wake of Trump's on-again, off-again tariffs and his threats to annex Canada through economic force. In Canada, we're still sinking deeper into the spirit. The spirit, this is actually a comment from our news gatherer. The spirit of hatred, the spirit of rage. Will worship. Will worship. There's a chapter, my father gave a Key of David program in it seems like in 1900 something. It was in 2020, actually, just a few years ago. He gave a Key of David program on will worship. And the content from that show, it became one of the chapters in this book, America Under Attack. And I've got a quote from it. It says, Hitler believed that if you tell a big lie and repeat it often enough, people will believe it. He wrote in Mein Kampf, in the big lie, there's always a certain force of credibility because the broad masses of a nation are always more easily corrupted in the deeper strata of their emotional nature than consciously or voluntarily. He says here, and thus, in the primitive simplicity of their minds, they more readily fall victims to the big lie than the small lie. The bigger the better. That's the way the devil operates. Yeah, Trump is the problem. Everything wrong with this world is because of bad orange man. Sam Livingston, our producer, he contacted an author, wrote a big book about the dear leader, Barack Obama. And I mean, he really criticized Obama in the book, and we thought it would be great to bring him on this program. He didn't want to come on the program. I think he thought last year when we were saying Trump was going to come back that he just saw this program as pro-Trump. And he emailed to Sam Livingston, I know that Donald Trump is 100% vile demagogue, and I pray that he has a fatal heart attack as soon as possible. That's a distinguished author who wrote a big book on Barack Obama. That's a commentator. That's not a 14-year-old. This is an old man. I pray that Donald Trump has a fatal heart attack as soon as possible. What a prayer. He prays this. Spirit of murder. It's everywhere you look. Rage, anger. You see why it was a challenge to get back into the news cycle on Monday? Coming off an inspiring weekend about God's sacrificial love and what God did for the whole world because he loves the whole world. But even that story, look at what the world did to God's son. God gave his only begotten son because he loves this world. And the world murdered him. The spirit of murder was alive and well 2,000 years ago. It was so strong. And you see it laid out there in the Gospels. The Gospel writers talking about these mobs saying, yeah, they were plotting to kill Jesus Christ. Just another news event from their day. Plotting to murder the Son of God, God's own Son. God is love, it says in 1 John 4. Jesus Christ is love. He came to give us a perfect demonstration of how to live that way, the way of love. And the world hated it. The world tried to blot it out. The world assassinated him. My father says in AUA, this book, Hitler said, what you tell people in the mass in a receptive state of fanatic devotion will remain. Words received under a hypnotic influence are radical and impervious to every reasonable explanation. Forget about reason. Just tell a big lie and keep saying it nonstop. Then people will eventually believe it. They're not going to look into the percentages, the tariffs. They're certainly not going to look into the tariffs that their own country puts on the United States. It's just the United States. It's just America. That's the problem. And especially because Bad Orange Man's there. If only we could get Joe Biden back in office. That's the way so many of them think. You look at the lies, the deception, as I've been saying the last few programs, haven't had time to get into it, but just the way even history is being revised, going back and scrubbing history and telling lies. And those lies are being circulated to tens of millions of people. I mean, you can get to the truth, but you really have to be willing to dig. But when you know the truth, Jesus said this, it'll set you free. God's word is truth. You see why we need a solid foundation based on God's truth, based on the word of God. Otherwise, it just turns into every man doing what seems right in his own eyes. And like that clip brought out, I played it for you the other day from Mr. Armstrong, where he said that if it's your thoughts, I mean, you think it's right because they're your thoughts. You love your thoughts. Whereas the Bible says that we've got to forsake our thoughts and ways and turn to God in repentance and faith. I mentioned this Harvard story, losing the $2 billion in government subsidies. And I mentioned just how that alone is a pretty big story, as taxpayers are realizing what all of our money goes toward. It's not Harvard alone either. It's all of these universities, these left-wing communist institutions. Harvard getting a lot, $2 billion, but others getting hundreds of millions. I mean, that's a lot of money. Coming from Joe taxpayer in Nebraska or Ohio or Idaho or Montana to fund all of this propaganda. And President Trump's trying to remove their tax-exempt status. Good for him. Why should they have tax-exempt status, Harvard, when they're a rabid left-wing institution that's quite all right with anti-Semitism? Yeah, can't even crack down on that. Listen, if you come out on the Harvard campus in support of Hamas, you're going to be a hero like Kilmar, just like Trayvon, just like George Floyd. because that's what the regime does. They defend criminals. They hate Trump so much. They hate government and law and order so much. They hate their country so much that they defend the indefensible. This is from the Telegraph. American conservatives turn on Winston Churchill. What? Conservatives? I mean, I knew the radical leftists turned against him long ago. It says Trump may be a fan, but isolationism is fueling revisionism about Britain's wartime leader among hard-right U.S. influencers. Sitting in Joe Rogan's podcast studio, thick smoke from the host's cigar swirling around him, Douglas Murray did not mince words. So Murray was in there. We've played clips of him before, but he was in there trying to defend Churchill. Just trying to point out that Churchill's not the villain of World War II. What is wrong with people that would say that? Listen to Douglas Murray from that Rogan podcast, clip 14.
Daryl Cooper. Who's the other one? There was one I just checked on the way here. Daryl Cooper, and then... Oh, yeah, Daryl Cooper, Ian Carroll. Look, these guys are not historians. They're not knowledgeable about anything.
No one's calling Ian Carroll.
No, but then why listen to their views on Churchill?
Why listen to them? Rogan's trying to defend these guys. They've been on his show. I think Cooper certainly has been. And he's there saying, yeah, Churchill was the villain of World War II. Well, we're not saying they're, legitimate historians. But like Murray says there, you're putting them on your podcast where, 13, 14 million people get to hear this? People that aren't actually plowing through history books, by the way. They're hearing some guy just spout off, Churchill, everything that happened in World War II. Really, you could put the blame on Winston Churchill. A lot of young people believe this. That's right. Listen to clip 15.
But if you only get the contrary view, which is, isn't it fun if we all pretend Churchill was the bad guy of the 20th century, at some point you're going to lead people down a path where they think that's the view. And that's of the most profound kind.
I don't think that's what he's trying to do.
I think that's exactly what they're doing. And the problem is that because your own platform has come about because you're a very successful comedian and much more, and you do ask questions, and you are interested. But there are a lot of people who have come along, partly I think because they've come on this show, who have come along and they've decided, I can play this double game. On the one hand, I'm going to push really edgy and frankly sometimes horrific opinions. And then if you say, that's wrong, they say, I'm a comedian.
Yeah, they justify their actions, their statements, their edgy commentary. Well, I'm not actually a historian, so am I not in sport, like it says in the Proverbs? This is from that Telegraph piece. Despite Mr. Trump being a Churchill fan, having twice restored the bust of the wartime leader to the Oval Office after it was removed by Barack Obama, I mean, nobody hates Churchill and the Churchill legacy quite like the dear leader, quite like Barack Obama. But now here you see the attacks, the relentless and vicious attacks on Churchill coming from the right, coming from conservatives. And of course, Satan is behind all of this. Churchill's mentioned at the first part of Ezekiel 33. He was a watchman. He stood up against tyranny. He saved the Western nations. Of course, Satan's going to try to go after that legacy and denigrate it and trash it and sling it through the mud. It's just a shock that it's coming from those on the right. Now, Rogan, America's most listened to podcaster, and Tucker Carlson, a conservative journalist and commentator, both recently interviewed Daryl Cooper, a hard-right influencer, who has described Britain's wartime leader as the chief villain of World War II. The chief villain! He's ahead of Hitler. It's kind of like what that survey in Germany brought out a week or two ago. Yeah, 76% of Germans see Vladimir Putin as a threat to their national security, and 74% see Donald Trump as a threat. So how do you reason with people like this? With minds that want to take a baseball bat to an image of Donald Trump and just start smashing it in a rage room. I mean, you're filled with rage. Trump derangement is real. They hate Trump so much. Why? Why do they hate Trump so much? And why do they swoon before the dear leader so much? They're not doing that anymore, but you go back to 2009, 2010, they were swooning. They had tingles running up their legs. This is not normal, what we're seeing. This kind of out of control emotion, this kind of all or nothing emotion, this kind of rage, this kind of irrational reasoning. Both Rogan and Carlson have had Daryl Cooper on their podcasts, and he believes that Churchill was the chief villain of World War II. There you go. Listen, if you skip ahead to that one by Neil Ferguson, as he's commenting on this as well. I think this is clip 8.
Daryl Cooper to Tucker Carlson, quote, Churchill was the chief villain of the Second World War, close quote. Where to begin?
Exactly. Where do you start on that? And actually, it's very much what I said earlier about the 1619 project. You've got to just go back to the original facts. The war broke out because Hitler invaded Poland, and in the April of 1939, 5 months previously, the British government, which Churchill wasn't in at the time, of course, by the way, gave a guarantee to Poland that it would go to war if Germany invaded it. So Churchill can't be blamed for that. He certainly can't also be blamed later for not making peace, because he wasn't in the government until September 1939. He wasn't Prime Minister until May 1940, by which time Hitler had invaded Holland and Belgium, and shortly later was going to invade France as well. So, just the sheer chronology, the dates do not fit this insane thesis.
Just look at the chronology as he brings out. This is Andrew Roberts, by the way. I've got another one from Neil Ferguson in a second. But just look at the chronology. The most destructive, deadliest war in the history of humankind. It was in motion. It had already started before Churchill even came to power. That was May of 1940. Hitler had invaded Poland. Well, before that, Austria. He had moved on to Holland, Belgium. And then at the very last minute, even beyond the last minute, the British people finally say, all right, let's get Churchill in there. At least he'll fight back. Unlike Chamberlain and others. Chamberlain waved the piece of paper. We've got peace. He said, peace, peace. And then war came suddenly. And then Churchill comes out of the wilderness, saves Britain, saves the West. And you've got people like Daryl Cooper talking with Tucker Carlson. I mean, we're talking about two of the most popular podcasters in the nation. Carlson and Rogan. They bring them on. They say their edgy comments, and you get some tacit approval from Tucker and from Rogan. And then when they're pressed a bit, well, now they're not an actual historian, so you take what they say with a grain of salt. This after they've reached millions and millions of people with their revisionism history. The Telegraph says this is a very clear movement on a subset of the American right, but it's a growing movement. And that's why I believe we should challenge it, says Murray. It quotes Murray in this article. It's a growing movement. It's kind of like Holocaust deniers. How does that grow? Well, it's because of teachers, instructors, educators, professors, some of them on college campuses, university campuses, that are relentless in their pursuit of propaganda. They preach propaganda. And more people believe it. You know, my father's talked even here recently about America's betrayal of Israel. And you look at the first term of Donald Trump, and coming into this one of our viewers even brought this out in his feedback. It's kind of hard to imagine a scenario where America would betray Israel with the Trump administration in there. And yet, in many ways, it's already happened. Look at all the demands on Hamas. Every single one of those hostages better be released. And then the pressure on Israel for a ceasefire, and Israel has since resumed conflict with Hamas. You have these reports of late, and maybe, you know, as to how true they are, the pressure the Trump people are putting on Israel to not strike at Iran. That was at the top of the news stack this morning. Whether or not it's true, I mean, it's believable. Because again, Donald Trump sees himself as a peacemaker. He doesn't want any foreign wars. He doesn't want any more wars to start. And then the flip-flopping over, yeah, we're fine with Iran producing uranium as long as it's at a certain percentage. And then the next day, no, it's got to be completely dismantled. These are dangerous times that we're in. And you see the devil's fingerprints on everything. He's even trying to scrub the history books. It's like it's straight out of 1984. Just throw it down the memory hole. That's not a big deal. Here's Douglas Murray on Rogan, clip 16.
Daryl has some of the most nuanced, balanced, and charitable views on all the figures in history.
Well, particularly Hitler, it seems.
No, you're wrong. True. You're wrong. He doesn't. What did he call him? How did he describe him?
I think he compared him to a methed out psychopath who was holding an entire nation of people hostage, I believe was the
He also said on here that he wasn't anti-Semitic until the Holocaust. There were no speeches of Hitler's in the 1930s.
No, he said he was not public about it.
He said he was downplaying it to win over. He said there was a period where he was downplaying it to win over popular support in Germany. It was his argument.
There is no historian of World War II who thinks that Hitler was downplaying anti-Semitism in the 1930s. That was what he was doing. He wrote a book about it in the 1920s. He got to power on it, and he grew his power on the back of it. The idea that you can argue that in the 1930s, Adolf Hitler was downplaying the anti-Semitism, like, there's no historian who would agree with that.
Murray points out he wrote Mein Kampf in, 1923? It was all there. My father goes through this in the Winston Churchill booklet. And the signs were just screaming. He's a fascist. He hates Jews. He wants to rule the world. And you've got people like Cooper on with these podcasters, these most popular podcasters, saying, Hitler did try to downplay things. He was trying to win the popular support. No, the popular support was for Hitler's views. And like this other, I played you the clip of Andrew Roberts. Victor Davis Hanson is on with that panel, and he's talking about the reason why, history is so important is that human nature is the same today as it was in the time of the Greeks and the Romans. Now, there's a lot of people, a lot of educators, even a lot of modern historians that don't believe that. And so they can go and scrub out the history and say, there would never be a Nazi movement again. No one could ever come in the spirit of Adolf Hitler in our day. We're just too far advanced. We're too sophisticated. Better be careful. Look at the spirit of hatred and rage that's in the air. Aimed at the moment, Donald Trump. They hate Trump so much. Trump. They talk about him as if he's Hitler. And then at the same time say, Hitler wasn't so bad. Churchill was the real villain. I like Joe Rogan. I don't listen to his podcast. Profanity all the way through, generally. But we've played clips We do hunt for clips from that show, but to hear Rogan and then the other guy defend the indefensible, it shows why we need God's truth as our foundation. Churchill, obviously, was not a perfect man. Churchill was certainly not woke. He was not politically correct. He had some flaws. But the man was a towering figure of history, a courageous man, a bold man who fought against tyranny and fascism, who defended the Jews. You don't see much of that today. You don't see it on the campus of Harvard. I mean, they've drawn a line in the sand. You're not going to tell us to crack down on anti-Semitism. There's free speech. We've got to be able to put it on a platform. Hatred for Jews. Listen to more from Doug Murray. This is clip 18. Or sorry, play clip 17.
What these two guys in particular have said on repeated podcasts with both of you, it's an attempt to downplay Hitler and always to do down Churchill.
I don't think you downplayed Hitler.
Whatever way they can. No, I said in conversations with you and others, this is the shtick of these guys. They've decided it's edgy and funny, and I think this is very, very interesting and also very dangerous because we live in an era now that the right has got some mojo back in America. We saw years of crazy left overreach where they tried to make us all say the craziest things. And completely predictably, there are now figures on the right playing with really dark and ugly stuff on their side.
I agree
and
with
they
that.
are mainstreaming
I don't
this,
think
and I
Daryl's
think it's
doing that.
partly being mainstreamed by the two people I just described. And both of you have kept speaking to these people, and you don't get on the historians who know about this. And that's just alarming to me.
It is alarming. And good for him to speak up. He may not be invited back on Joe Rogan's podcast because he's confronting them there openly. This other discussion, it comes from Uncommon Knowledge on PBS, I think it is. They had Victor Davis Hanson, they had Neil Ferguson, they had Andrew Roberts. We played that clip previously. But like Doug Murray says there, I mean, here you've got people like Daryl Cooper going out and about, espousing some dark, ugly content. And he's ultra conservative. He comes from the hard right. Why would you give this man a platform? Why? And why not bring on, a true historian? Someone that, like Andrew Roberts brought out, actually goes through the chronology. Hitler's on the march in 1939. He's on his way through Belgium and Holland in 1940. And then finally, Churchill comes into power in May of 1940. You have the Battle of Britain and, well, Britain's finest hour as they were bombarded by the German Luftwaffe. Even the dates don't measure up. They don't add up. But press Daryl Cooper and he says, hey, I'm just a comedian. Come on now. Am I not in sport? These are dangerous narratives to be out there actively promoting and defending, as you hear there. Listen to clip 18.
I'm saying, just as the left likes to play with very dark, ugly stuff, and they've done it for decades, they have played down Chairman Mao's murder of the Chinese throughout his era in power. They played down Stalin. They still march on occasions with posters of Lenin. They've spent decades trying to do down evils that were done on their side. And I would suggest that one of the things that is going on at the moment is, despite, or maybe because of what you just described, there are movements now on the right in America, subcultures, including people who follow both of you, who are very interested in playing with this absolute beyond the pale thing. Why somebody like Jake Shields wants to play around with Holocaust denial? Why?
There's an article following this exchange over at the Federalist. You know the Federalist, we quote from them often, very conservative website. Douglas Murray's unbearable smugness undermines his own argument on Israel and Ukraine. It's Murray that's the problem here. His unbearable smugness. It says here, during his recent appearance on Rogan's podcast, British political commentator Douglas Murray provided a masterclass of how to alienate an audience by coming off as arrogantly and condescendingly as possible. He's arrogant for standing up for a true record of history, for standing up for Churchill, for exposing Adolf Hitler. He's condescending. So says the Federalist. I don't know who wrote this at the Federalist, but hopefully it's not one of our favorite writers. It says, at one point, Murray becomes incensed at the claim that Hitler downplayed his anti-Semitism in the 1920s and 30s and asserts that no historian would agree with that statement. There is, however, ample evidence that Hitler did indeed strategically downplay his anti-Semitism to court voters, and that mainstream historians acknowledge this. So his attempt to browbeat Rogan and Smith with an appeal to authority only reveals his own ignorance on the topic. Well, then I guess Andrew Roberts, Neil Ferguson, Victor Davis Hanson, I suppose they're ignorant too. They just don't understand. They just don't realize how, a different take on some of that tragic, horrific, horrendous history is kind of edgy. I mean, after all, we're coming from the right. We've got our mojo back. There's false, fake narratives all over the place. And there are, that's true. But now here they are coming saying that, well, the CIA is responsible for everything. They've got, you get the JFK files. It just adds fuel to some of these arguments. Now you can say it's not just JFK, but 9/11 too. How about that? Let's call into question everything. Don't get me wrong. I've gone on more than any podcaster about the lies that the devil perpetuates. This earth is full of them. But you'll notice in all of these ideas or theories, there's never any talk of repentance or the fact that those twin towers came tumbling down because we're being cursed because of our sins. It's not because of some kind of CIA master plot to bring down the government of the United States or to increase the government's powers with Homeland Security or whatever. What about our sins? What about the rage of human nature? What about the spirit of hatred and murder? What about turning to the Word of God for truth? What about humbling ourselves before the mighty hand of God? What about acknowledging that the horrific tragedy of World War II was brought on by, we can't just put all the blame even on Adolf Hitler. Look at human nature. Look at the spirit of appeasement that was in the air. Appease the tyrants. We haven't learned anything. That's one of the main themes or lessons in our Winston Churchill booklet. Look at the spirit of the media back then, Chamberlain and company, the British government, while Hitler was on the rise. And Churchill was the only one that saw right through it and said, hey, he's going to overtake the whole world if we don't stand against it. If you don't have our Winston S. Churchill booklet, make sure you call our operators today for your free copy. No cost, no obligation. The number, 1-866-930-3024. I've got more, but that's all we have time for on today's show, the fastest moving hour in broadcasting. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily. Thanks for joining us on today's show, and we'll see you again tomorrow.